Okay, so we can start the event for this evening, where we will hear Arianna Scarcella and Chiara Ricci talk about the challenges of conserving street art. Both employees of the Center for Conservation and Restoration of Cultural Heritage La Venaria Reale in Italy, Arianna and Chiara will present a talk on the challenges of conservation of street art, with views from applied conservation practice and conservation science. The talk will present the main outcomes of the European project for the conservation of art in public spaces, or in short, CAPuS. And I will leave the floor to Chiara and Arianna.
Okay, so tonight the main goal is to present you some of the challenges we faced during the CAPuS project, which is a project that was carried out between 2018 and 2021. It was a project, a shared project, which involved a network of different partners coming from 5 European countries, Italy, Spain, Croatia, Germany, and Poland. And 17 different partners were involved. One of the leading partner was the University of Torino, then the Center for Conservation and Restoration of Venaria Reale, the University of Vigo, and all the Fine Art Academy of Warsaw in Poland, the Technology, Art and Science in Cologne, and all the other partners you can see in the slide. The main goal was, the main topic was the conservation of art in public spaces, in particular contemporary art. And so we faced different case studies, mainly mural paintings, contemporary murals and graffiti, and also different metal outdoor sculptures. More than 100 artworks were studied and analyzed. And in Turin, we, together with the University of Torino, that was our main partner, we focused on the topic of street art and urban art. So in the first step of the project, we selected 14 different artworks, selecting some case studies with different features, namely different supports and different artistic techniques. And also we decided to consider both artwork that was created in a spontaneous way, let's say, either illegal context, and also other artworks created within some institutional events like street art festivals or such things. And the project was created within the Knowledge Alliances project of the Erasmus program, and involved different stakeholders. So not only higher education institution as the universities I mentioned before, but also local communities, since we are speaking of public spaces. Of course, we have to consider also the inhabitants of those sites and cities, local authorities like the city of Turin or Milan or Vigo in Spain. They all participated in the project. Some enterprises were involved. For example, the Schmink company or the Antares companies that are producing conservation products or art projects or art products, and also the Montana Colors company, which is one of the leading companies in the production of spray cans and products for graffiti and street art scene. And then we also involved different conservators in the European framework. So we really try to to create an open dialogue with all different stakeholders and people involved in the topic. Okay. So the CAPuS project had two main goals. One of them was the development of guidelines for the protection and conservation of these artworks. And the other goal was the introduction of some training module for higher education institutions, since we were aware that very often this topic lacks in the academic disciplines and programs. And the final outcome of the project was indeed an e-learning path, let's say two e-learning paths, one addressed to students and one addressed to lecturers that are willing to introduce those topics in their programs. And all these contents and resources are available for free online. You can, if you are interested, you can connect to this e-learning platform of the University of Turin. And as for the other main outcomes, the guidelines, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Arianna that will introduce you the team.
Thanks, Chiara. So according to the guidelines, the main, we can say the main challenge that we have to face at first, so when we start working in the planning of the different activities of the project, was actually how we can define we can say guidelines that can be useful for different intervention on artworks that, due to their location, due to the material that their constitutive material are so different. And actually, this question was one, and it actually is still one of the main topics of the project. And therefore, we decide to we can say to shape, to define a sort of path that can be useful just to trace a sort of a series of different steps. What we would like to underline, to outpoint, is that every single artworks, and this was true actually during the project, and was actually one of the main topics that we discussed also during the different steps, the different steps of the project. Every single artworks has very specific needs. And usually those needs are very are in relation with the environment, with the social, we can say, surround of the art. So we can say the use that sometimes somehow some people made of the space that are somehow part of those artworks. And also the constitutive materials of those different kind of artworks and the techniques that the different artists use to realize them has a very strong effect on their we can say conservation in general. So at first we understood that it was and actually in our opinion it is very difficult to define something that can be used in every single case, can be applied generally, we can say, in any time a conservator, a student in conservation has to face the challenging conservation project of a contemporary artwork. And so we try to define, to change a little bit our perspective, and to define something that can be used, that can collect somehow different tools and tips that can be used by students or by professionals to define what we hope to be will be the very specific process that, as I said, in our opinion, is very case dependent. And so we decide to create those guidelines with a specific structure that we will see better in a few minutes, with 3 main goals. The first one was to support some, we can say, the creation of a critical approach to the definition of a conservation process, to the definition of an approach towards the conservation of those kinds of artworks, by adding by posing to the user some question that can be investigated somehow, we can say, with very different tools, thanks to scientific campaign, to technical analysis, to research that are somehow related to interview to the artist, or to specific analysis of the context, of the background, for example. And so we try to plan a sort of path, as we said, that is composed of those different questions, and we try to suggest different ways that can be followed, that can be useful to find the specific answers to those questions. The second aim was to support both students and professionals in, we can say, the definition of a common approach that can be, and in our opinion has to be, in particular for the conservation of street artworks, can be at the same time based on a scientific knowledge of the material, of the degradation process, but at the same time as to face the very important topics related to, we can say, the social context of those kind of artworks in terms of relation with the citizens, as Chiara mentioned before, but also in relation to, for example, the creation of the artworks. We, for example, discovered that artworks that were created in different occasions, in different situations, as a different have a different relation with the citizens, are, we can say, seen in a very different way. And also the fact that they that the people that usually lives those spaces is can feel somehow this relation, this closeness, we can say, with the artworks, may somehow lead to different, in one case, degradation phenomenon, but in the other case, to different care of those artworks. Sometimes, for example, other groups that were involved in the project analyze in detail the possibility of involve local communities or associations, for example, in the planning of maintenance activities, or just to raise the awareness towards the possible, we can say, the possible degradation causes that may somehow affect the artworks due to the presence of the citizens, of the human beings. And the third goal was to present, to we can say, explain how complex this path is, and how complex is important that this part is perceived. So speaking about complexity is usually something that can be at first a little bit strange, especially when you are talking. We are thinking about didactic materials or training path. Usually we try to make things very simple in order to be better understood by the learners. But in this case, we figure out that it was very important. It is fundamental for every future conservation activity that also students understand how complex this the conservation of those kinds of artwork actually is, and how important is to combine in the same, we can say, single project, the different perspective and the different knowledge coming from the different disciplines that are somehow related to the conservation of those kinds of artworks, namely humanistic approach, scientific approach, but also technical and social ones. As I said before, the guidelines has a very specific, we can say, structure that reflects the fact that we imagine them, this tool as a sort of path. So as a multi-step process that can be, that everyone, students and conservators, may go through in order to better analyze the different topics, the different aspects of the conservation process. We define three main sections. The first related with the acquisition, we can say, of a knowledge, to the deeper of the knowledge of the artworks, thanks to different tools, and we will see them in a minute. We will present one of the case of study that we went through here in Turin. That was a mural painting. So we will see all these different 8 sections in detail, referred to a specific case of study. But in general, we can say that the first 3 steps that we highlight are related to the deepening of the general knowledge of the artworks in terms of technical, artistic, stylistic, but also scientific knowledge. The second section is related to, we can say, all the activities that involves a critical evaluation of the data preliminary collected. So everything on the basis of the preliminary information, we define different steps that starting from the analysis of the causes for degradation leads to the definition of the treatments that are necessary to, we can say, intervene in the different case of study. And the final one, the third section, is the one related to the practice, so the intervention, we can say, on sites. And in this case, we outpoint some of the, we can say, the most important topics that went through all the CAPuS project. The first one is related to the sustainability in terms of economic, but also environmental sustainability. And we go through all those topics, especially in the section number 7, that one's related to the planning of the intervention. But we go through the different sections in detail. So as I said before, the first one has 3 main, the first one, we can say, big section has 3 main goals related to the recognition of the values of the artworks in terms of technical aspects, aesthetic, so what the artworks, the artists would like to express with their works, in terms of social perspective, we, for example, faced some artworks that were realized with a very specific social commitment in order to, for example, to highlight some of the worst pages of the very recent history of the city. They were realized in. We will see an example in a few minutes, because the painting the mural painting we were working on in Torino is actually one of those cases of study. The second point, so the second perspective to enhance the knowledge of the artworks is for assessing the condition of the artworks. So in order to, of course, is something that we can say for conservation professionals is quite clear, is quite common, but the importance of assessing the condition of the artworks in terms not only of the, we can say, recognition of the different degradation phenomenon, but also in the evaluation of the different we can say the different aspects in terms of constitutive materials or previous intervention that might somehow have an effect on the condition of the artwork itself. The second areas is the one related to, as I said before, the evaluation of the preliminary collected data, and so starting from the different degradation phenomena, try to understand, to better clarify the different degradation causes in terms of investigation, for example, of the presence of any environmental agents that might somehow have negative effect on the conservation of the artwork, as well as investigate some we can say topics, causes, related to the use that people and citizens do of the spaces where the artworks were realized. The second step, so once clarified the whole knowledge of the artworks, so once highlighted the different values that are somehow part of the artworks itself, and once identify the different, the possible, we can say, degradation causes, what we suggest to do is to plan some treatments. Of course, in this case, the guidelines suggest to start with some tests, and in this case, the attention was in particular put on the importance of make those tests replicable, representative, also from a scientific point of view. And then the last, we can say, step is to pass from the test on mockups, from the test that we all made in laboratories, to the test that we realize in situ. And as everyone, every conservators know very well, this passage is not always as simple as it seems, because usually what works very well on the mockups has very somehow different behavior in the test on site, and so the planning of an effective diagnostic campaign for evaluating the results of the test in situ is essential to better identify and understand the behavior of the different products and materials that we plan to use before starting, we can say, the treatment of the whole area. In this section, for example, we highlight some of the most important criteria that might guide somehow the definition of the treatments in terms of, for example, sustainability, reversibility of the material, stability, lower interaction with environmental agents, and so on. So very case dependent on the different the different treatments you are considering. So, for example, in terms of consolidation, cleanings, or we can say aesthetic treatments such as retouching or filling lacuna, we identify different criteria that can be used to define, of course, in relation to the specific case of study. This was actually our main goal, that we analyze through all the different steps, but the selection criteria as that can be somehow used to define the different treatments, the different techniques. And finally, the third section is the one related to the practice. So the main goals was to outline what could be the most effective strategies to answer to the very specific needs of the artworks that were, of course, analyzed and described in the preliminary sections. And as I said before, specific attention was also put in the definition of the different sustainable perspective, sustainable analysis that can be considered in the definition of a conservation project. For example, in terms of public engagement, involvement of the different stakeholders that somehow can be interested in conservation, such kind of artworks. It's something that at first sounds very uncommon even for us, but we noticed that specifically for these kinds of artworks, both institutions and local communities has a very strong, we can say, affection towards these artworks. And so the creation of, we can say, engagement of both public institution and public was something that really can really has better lead to very effective results. We also suggest some of the steps of the topics we can say that can be considered in terms of safety measure of for the planning and we can say realization of conservation treatments on site, and the importance of, we can say, documenting to leave a proper documentation of all the different steps.
Okay, so we are now getting a little bit more in detail in each step, retracing the path we followed for the study and conservation intervention on one of the murals we selected in Turin. That is a very peculiar mural that was created in 2008 as a memorial of a tragedy. As Arianna said, one of the probably most sad pages of the recent history of the city, since in 2007 there was a huge fire in a steelwork factory, and 7 different workers lost their life. So it was very tragic moment for the city and for the nation. And this fire arised a very intense discussion also about the topic of safety on work sites. So one of the victim was a friend of a very popular writer or graffiti artist at that moment, and that's why the families of the victims asked to this guy to realize a mural as a memorial of those people. Since the occasion and the topic were very important, and of course was not something related to a self artistic expression, but was something of general importance for the city. These artists involved all other groups and crews that were active at that moment in the city. So 12 different people, 12 different artists worked together on that mural, and for them was I think it was the first occasion they work on such a big artwork that is, I think, around 15 meters long. So it's very long, and it's located in the city center. So it was really an important wall for them to create an artwork on. And for us, it was a very important on-site work at the end of the project to retrace all the paths that Arianna already described to you. And we worked there with a group of students because the University of Torino, in collaboration with the Conservation Center, hosts a master degree in conservation for young conservators. So we worked there during a summer internship in 2019 for a couple of weeks. And so going through the guidelines, we started from the first step. So trying to know more about this artwork, to look at it from different perspectives. Also, literally speaking, we look at the mural from the back side. And that was very important because, for example, we discovered that one portion of the wall was renovated at one point. And that's probably related, that this can probably explain different degradation processes and phenomena that we observed on the front side. So it was a very simple action, but very important to also remember to students that it's important to look at the artwork in within the environment is located. And then we met the artists, we met some of them, and we interviewed them. We also tried different ways of interaction. So we had some voice recorded interviews and some video recorded interviews. It can be simple, but of course we realized that different ways of interaction can be more or less effective depending on the people you are facing. It was very, very interesting because they allowed us to deepen different aspects of the artwork. So the contest it was created, the creation process. So how the idea was a sort of compromise between the need of the families of the victims and the artists and the inhabitants of the city. We asked the artists about the materials they used, and it was very important for us, this discussion with the artists, also to interpret and to go through the scientific data that we collect later with our diagnostic campaign. And then we asked them about their feeling regarding the conservation of the artwork. Usually when we speak about street art, we are thinking about something, a sort of art that is considered ephemeral, but some of the artists are changing their mind. And in this specific occasion, of course, it was created as a memorial. So in this case, to keep the memory of the event, it was represented. It's important, and it was part of the goal of the mural. We also met the artists in front of the artwork itself, and I think it was the most interesting moment. It's really important to discuss with them in front of the artwork because we had the opportunity to go through different very technical aspects also related to the use and the overlapping of different materials, the way the artistic technique they used, and the degradation phenomena that we could observe. If you're interested to know more about this artwork and all the interesting aspects the artists told us, you can have a look to some videos, video clip that we collected on the YouTube channel of the Conservation Center. And moreover, all the interviews to this group of artists, but also to all other artists that we met and interviewed during the CAPuS project are gathered and collected in a digital repository that was created to the great, we can say, great efforts of the University of Split in Croatia. And you can find the interviews and all other materials, the analytical reports about the study of the materials, the condition reports, all the materials and resources that were produced along the project on the artworks selected. You can access online to this repository, and again, you can find here the link, the web link, and you can find different kinds of materials for free. And then going to the second steps, the study of the constitutive materials and the technique of execution, I can report my own experiences with my colleagues of the university. We faced a diagnostic campaign, including both non-invasive analytical techniques. We performed some multispectral imaging techniques and also some sampling. So we got some samples to the laboratory to further investigate the materials. So we, for example, we performed some infrared spectroscopy analysis to better recognize and identify the painting materials. And it had been very interesting to compare our results with the information that the artists themselves provided during the interviews. You can see here some pictures of the creation of the mural, and they told us that they used an acrylic paint to create the background, the black background, and the big numbers that represented the time of the fire. And then they realized some other specific details, for example, the flames or the fire extinguisher with spray paints. And that's something that we had confirmed by our scientific analysis, and we could recognize different also binding media. So some of the paints were acrylic paints and some other were alkylic paints. We also collected some samples, some stratigraphic samples to look at the electron microscope, and it allowed us to retrace all the different layers overlapping. So, for example, in that case, you can see in the picture, the yellow layer was the original color of the wall itself. That was a vinylic paint. And then they realized a black background with an acrylic paint, and red is, I think in that case, was part of the fire extinguisher, so an alkylic paint. In some points, we found more than one, for example, black layer. And for us, the question was if someone in a following moment repainted some areas of the murals. But actually, in that case, it was fundamental and crucial, the interaction with the artists, because they told us that they realized the mural in beginning of December, I think. So the temperature was very cold, and just the night after they spread the black background, it snowed. So probably due to the very cold temperature, the paint literally fell down, and they had to put again another layer. So in the points we found different black layers. It was probably due to that incident that occurred. And of course, we tried to collect all the information about the materials and the artistic techniques, also with some graphical maps. And starting from that overview on the mural, we go further in the study of the degradation phenomena and the degradation causes.
Yes, in relation to the degradation phenomenon, we at first understood the importance of realize a proper and effective documentation that can be useful not only for the planning of the present strategies for the conservation of the artworks, but of course in the future for future activities on the artworks, namely conservation activities, but also the, we can say, periodic maintenance. And during the CAPuS project, to answer to the very specific needs, we decided to create a new condition report form that was designed, we can say, after different survey and researchers of the different materials, the different condition reports available in very different contexts. We try to focus our attention and our research on, of course, the field of the conservation of street artworks and public artworks, but we found very different condition report that highlights different aspects. And so we decided to create something that specifically fit to our needs. This is just the structure of this tool. You can download it as the other materials that Chiara presented before from the online site of the CAPuS project. So it's something that is of course available. And considering the large number of artworks we are working on, it was essential to, we can say, synthesize the different information, the different data that all the groups collected during the analysis of the different artworks. So we decided to create a first part that highlights the most important data related to the location of the artworks, the dimension in this case of the mural, and the specific, we can say, legal terms that somehow are related to the possibility and the needs of asking the necessary permission for any further intervention on the artworks. Then we create a section related to the description of the environment, both on a, we can say, physical perspective, so the presence of streets, the presence of vegetation, such as trees, grass, gardens, and so on. But also from a social perspective, like, for example, in this case, we, as Chiara said before, we had to consider the very specific occasion for the creation of this artwork, and so we underlined the fact that somehow the artworks is a sort of memorial, a collective memorial, we can say. It was very appreciated by the local citizens, and so families and citizens that live all around there somehow care for the conservation of these artworks. And due to the fact that probably it was really realized by a group of artists that usually do not work together, these artworks was seen with and is actually seen with in a very respectful way by also all the other artists of the city. So those two we can say consideration were very important also for the conservation, for the assessment of the condition of the artworks, and that's why we include both of them in the description of the social context. Then there are some very specific sections related to the description of the degradation phenomenon, preliminary assessment of the general condition, and then specific section related to the different degradation phenomenon that we observe on the surface and in the background layers. We create a sort of grid, as you can say, that would like to be a sort of scheme for also the definition of we can say the description of the extension and the localization of the different degradation phenomena, so that also in the future it would be more simple to identify if a degradation phenomenon arise again in the same area, in the same position, and so may have a similar causes, we can say. Here there are some of the pictures that show the main degradation phenomena that we observe on the artworks we analyze. There are a lot of fractures related to somehow, in some cases, the presence of a new area, the one that Chiara showed you before in the picture. There are some lacunas related to the presence of different materials that were not so, we can say, that had bad interaction with the environmental agents and the lower background layers. There are some vegetal growth, especially in one area where the humidity and the rainwater usually stops for a while, so it causes an increase of the relative humidity percentage, and that leads to the growth of mods and different microorganisms. Once we start, but every single partner of the project starts compiling, we can say, the different condition report, we realized that it was very difficult to speak the same language, so to refer to the different degradation phenomenon using the same terms. That's why we worked together and for the creation of a common glossary for the definition of both, we can say, the general terms related to the description of street art and graffiti, such as terms that define the styles, the techniques used by the artist, and in the second section, all the terms related to the conservation. We highlighted different sections related to the different, we can say, effect that the different degradation phenomenon causes on the artworks. So we go through the presence of additional materials and substances on the surface, to the loss of cohesion, loss of material, and so on. All these terms were described in words, of course, in different languages. So there are different translations, at least in all the languages of the partners of the CAPuS project. There is a wider and more complete version that is monolingual in English. with the description of all the different styles and techniques used by the artists. And we also try to suggest to include, in order to make the description more clear, a picture of all the different terms that we were described. So there's, for example, are for some pages related, for example, to different degradation phenomena such as flaking, or the previous one was related to the technique of execution. So once we understood what were the main degradation phenomenon, we tried to assess and what, of course, were the main degradation, the causes for the degradation phenomenon that we observed. We try to define the strategies for the intervention, and we start making some tests on mock-ups. As usually, the most difficult things was to replicate the same degradation phenomenon that we observe in the real case. In this case, we try to manage this fact by combining different kind of, we can say, different rates of sand and cement in the creation of the background layers, and overlapping, then creating different stratigraphy, overlapping different kind of paints, namely acrylic or acrylic paint. We use also silica paint because one of the artworks we study was realized had a background layer made with silica paint. So once we released all the mock-ups, we try to replicate the degradation phenomenon that we observed, and this was one of the most challenging steps of the whole project, because it was actually very, very difficult to replicate exactly something that has a variety of different causes. And in this case, we use a thermal stress process we can say, to replicate the different degradation. We at first made some tests for the selection of products for consolidation of the painting layers. We try to at first define the most important criteria that can be useful in our case of study. In this case, of course, the general one, such as compatibility, reversibility, stability towards, for example, external agents, but also readhesion power. And this was one of the criteria that we tested in different manner. For example, trying to test the adhesion of the different products with the different layers of paint on the background. As you see in the picture, we at first try to we can say to fix the some flaking of a very thin painting layer made by an acrylic paint, but at the same time we also test the same properties on the on different substrates with testing the adhesion of small fragments. As you can see here, all the fragments has painting layers, but also a very thin layer of cements on the background. At the same time, this was just picture showing some of the different steps for the realization of the mockups, and here you find our other different tests for the consolidation assessment, we can say. And here, for example, we try to test the consolidation, the adhesive power of the different products that we test by with a very thin layer of acrylic paint on another acrylic paint on the background. So we test very different conditions in order to better assess what could be their interaction between the materials and the product that we we selected. We also test different percentage of the products in order to better define what would be the lower one with the best effects, we can say. And the second treatment that we try to analyze and to define was the cleaning. In fact, in the artworks that Chiara presented before, there were in the lower part of the painting where there was a tag that partially overlapped, we can say overlapped the original paint. And so we were asked to remove those traces of those tags from the original paint, of course, without any interaction with the constitutive materials. So we made some tests for selectively remove the different layers of paint, and that were also very challenging, because often we try to remove layers that has the same chemical composition, so they actually are soluble by the same solvents, the same product. So in this case, we, for example, try to use some chickens or some gels in order to selectively divide, we can say, the action of the solvents. And then we finally reply the same test on site, just to be sure that, as I said before, the result that we obtain at first in laboratories were also effective on site. We found that, for example, for the consolidation, one of the two products we tested, we found from the preliminary test on CAPuS, we found that two acrylic consolidants, were very effective for the consolidation of the flaking areas, for example. But once we tested them on site, we found that one of the two create some, we can say, some changes in the optical properties of the surface that were visible in some, we can say, glossy aspects of the painting layers. And so, thanks to those additional tests, we finally selected the best solution, both for consolidation and then for cleaning. Here was just the first step of cleaning of one of those tags. You can see the red paint is not actually part of the paint, but was part of those tags that were in the basement, just under the artworks itself. And here you can see another tested, we can say, another area that we clean at first with dry cleaning, just to remove the atmospherical particulate that was overlaid on the surface of the painting. So once we obtain the first results from the test on site, we can say enlarge the treatments on all the different areas that needs to be treated, both for consolidation and of course the cleaning of the wall surface of the paintings. Here there are some very critical areas, for example, that presented at first very important flaking of the painting layers that we succeed in, we can say, fix. We decide, we can say, in accordance with the artist, to leave the lacunas as they appear, we can say, so not to fill, not to retouch any lacuna on the surface. And that's why, for example, also when we found some lacunas that involve somehow the background layer, we just realize some fillings of the edges, just to maintain, to put in safe everything, and to slow down further degradation phenomenon in those areas. So I can say thank you to all of you for your attention, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chiara and Arianna. So we have at the moment one question from the attendees, and then I have also some questions and comments. So the first question is asking what was the worst cases that you have encountered with regard to either previous interventions or general deterioration phenomena, and how that made it more difficult to conserve the works of art?
I think it's difficult to say which one is the worst. For us, one very critical case study was another mural painting created by an Italian artist, but is internationally known as Millo, and he created a big mural in let's say suburbs of the city, so not in the city center as the previous one. And this area had some social problems. Let's say there are some drug dealers and some it's a very neighborhood which is which also different migrants. So it's a very let's say social complex. Thank you. Complex scene. And this area of the mural itself was part of a little garden. And so there was some degradation phenomena due to the soiling coming from this garden, and also by it's along a very traffic line of the city, but also there were some degradation phenomena due to the anthropic behavior. So for example, there was a strike, a demonstration strike in the area, and someone threw toward the mural some stones or something very heavy. So there were some big holes, not just lacunas, big holes in the mural due to this event. So I think this one was one of the most critical case study. In that case, I mean, of course, the conservation intervention cannot be the only solution. I mean, as Arianna also said before, you probably could reach your goal of conservation just also involving the people living in that area. So it's a complex strategy. And that's why we try to involve also the municipality, the local association, the students. So try to build and create a positive environment for the mural itself.
And just another question came in, so I'm going to start with that before moving on to my questions. So if you have encountered any murals that had to be detached and moved into a safer location?
No, we actually, we know this topic because a few years ago in Italy there was a very famous exhibition in which some paintings, mural paintings that were realized at first to be part of the city were detached and we can say kept in the museum in exhibition. So it is a very debate topic at the moment. During the project, since that the project was focused on the conservation of art in public space, we focused our attention and research on the conservation of our artworks that were that are actually on site. So one of the main, we can say, research line of the project was actually the interaction between the artworks and the environment. And so we decided to focus our research on artworks that are still, we can say, in the place where the artists realize them. So in artists that somehow are for them is somehow preserve the relation with the context, the environment, the urban context. Yeah.
Also related to this topic, it was very interesting to have interviews with the artists. They underlined that for them, it can be, in some cases, it can be good to preserve their artwork, but they cannot find the meaning of doing it if it's losing its purpose, initial purpose and goal. So if the goal was to communicate something to a broader audience, to the citizens, if you are removing this mural, they don't want actually this mural to be preserved. They prefer to do another one. So it was something very important for us to think about.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And so in terms of, I have a question about deterioration phenomena and materials. So have you observed any general trends? So could you generally associate specific materials that were used to deterioration phenomena in?
For example, for colors, for spray cans colors, there are some colors that fade much more than others due to UV light and solar irradiation. And I mean, the interesting aspect is that artists themselves are getting more and more aware about this aspect. So, for example, those artists that are moving to wider murals, they are selecting different products. So they are using less and less the spray pens just for very small details, and they actually prefer now to use acrylic paints because they found out they last more. So yes, there are some trends. Something very super critical is fluo colors, so fluorescent colors, and they perfectly know that if they use fluorescent colors, they will fade away in like few weeks or months, no more than that.
Yeah, thank you. And so that, sorry, Arianna, were you adding something?
Yeah, I was just saying that one of the most evident trend was the fact that the combination of very porous materials such as the background layers with acrylic paints or acrylic paint was one of the actual main threat for the conservation of this kind of artworks, because they have very different interactions between them and with the environment, very different answers toward the atmospherical agents, we can say. And so this relation always results in flaking and missing of, especially in some period of the year or in some region where there are very high level of, for example, rains or humidity, it results in missing of very big part of the painting layer.
That's why for festivals, for example, it's more and more frequent that the artists ask for having some preparation on the wall before they paint, because they know that for spontaneous work it cannot work, but for festivals or they ask to have prepaid wall.
Yeah, this is very interesting, because it seems from what you're saying now that there's a trend. You very specifically mentioned at the beginning that street art is meant to be ephemeral. However, it seems like it's moving more and more into something that is becoming less and less ephemeral, but more established. And so with regards to that, I have a question. So have you encountered artists who actually did not desire their works of art to be conserved, or have you encountered artists who had a specific view? Like for instance, for the mural that you presented, you had a very an approach to the conservation without any in-painting or filling that would leave sort of clear the history and what happened to the work of art, but then you decided to remove the tags. So did that follow the artist's view, and to what extent is that has affected your work?
I think it's difficult to find one single answer, because it really depends on the circumstances the artwork was created on, and on the purpose of the artwork. So of course we try to consider the artist's opinion, but also some of them underline that once they realize
Chiara, come a bit closer, sorry.
Sorry. Once they realize their artwork in an open public space, they don't own the artwork anymore. So some of them also underlined, if this artwork is cared and by the local inhabitants, and if they want to preserve it, it can be one of the criteria to take into account.
Yeah. And I have another question from the attendees. So are the artists now working with the paint suppliers to create more stable spray paints, and which would probably be difficult where conservators need to remove graffiti from unwanted work?
Well, during the project, some of the artists ask us some suggestion about the selection of different materials, different products. So they ask us to somehow report the outcomes of our project, of our research to them, in order to better address the selection of different products for the future. As Chiara said before, especially in some, festival, or we can say artworks that were somehow committed by public institution, they actually ask for very specific kind of products. So we can say that this is a first step of awareness that is quite spread at the moment, we can say. And we do not had the occasion of, we can say, experiment any the possibility of matching the needs of artists with the needs of the suppliers. So I actually don't know if there are some artists that works together with the suppliers. At least in the project, this not happened, but usually our partners, our commercial partners, namely Montana, told us they work a lot with artists, just to have feedbacks from them about we can say the usability of the different products or the different formulation, and for the different artworks that they realize. So it's something that the suppliers and commercial firm, we can say, usually do. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I think that we're coming towards an end, and I think that also our attendees is a little bit, we're gone a little bit over time, but I just have a couple more questions very quickly. So we know what you presented is, of course, the ideal conservation project that every conservator would like to follow, and follow your beautiful workflow and have everything. However, we do know that that's not always possible, and that budgets are always, are in most cases limited. And so that's not always something that can be accessible to practitioners. So I want to try to understand, of course, there is a lot of material, the outcomes from the project that are available online. So interviews with artists, which of course can be relevant if a work of art from the same artist is to be conserved, but also your templates, are those available online? So in terms of, that's also tools that the conservator can use, and then of course all the information on the original materials as well. So it's great that to know that all of that corpus of information is then immediately available online to the conservator who would like to then approach a project without having Yeah.
Yes, and of course, for us, will be interesting also to have some feedbacks. So if someone is interested to use them or to give us any advice, I mean, it can be useful for future steps. And
yeah, it was this was actually one of the main goals of the project. We perfectly were aware that the fact that the conservation process usually, as Amarili said, not always may count on all the different steps that we highlight in, for example, the guidelines. And that's why we try to share as much as possible of the result of our research, of our tests and mock-ups. For example, in addition to all the different tools that we present, there are a lot of papers that all the different partners, of the project published about all the different tests and identification of the degradation causes that may somehow be helpful in the case that someone doesn't have the possibility to, you know, make all the tests, to have access to a specific diagnostic campaign. So we try, we can say that we were aware of the lucky situation we were in terms of possibility to make research. And actually this was one of the main purposes of the project itself, to share as much as possible, to create knowledge that can be shared and make available to all, to a wider public as possible.
Yeah. And just a last interesting question, sort of. You said that, of course, the involvement of local sort of communities, so to take into account all the different stakeholders, and that played a role. But how was that integrated in your projects? And if so, how? And do you have suggestions of ways to create a sense of belonging for the artwork, or was that always present? Or so how has that, what were the main sort of outcomes of the social, more social aspects of the project?
Sorry.
And I will let you go. Just
yes, we are really over time. We are sorry for that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Yes, it was very case dependent, and I think it was really difficult sometimes to create connections with the artists or with the inhabitants, the municipality. So the greatest efforts are to create connections, and then when you are there, it's easier to also create occasions to work together. Something very difficult was the copyright or the legal aspects. So anytime you want to do an intervention, you have to ask for authorizations to the municipality or the owner or the artist. So I think, yes, there are different ways. It depends on the city you are working on. Our framework was very different from other partners' frameworks in the network. And so I think really the starting point is to create connections and then work on that.
Yeah, okay. So if there are no more questions from the attendees, as we are over time, and it seems like someone is trying to
sorry for that.
I will want to thank you, Chiara and Arianna, for the very interesting talk today, and all the attendees as well. And I will just want to say a reminder that the presentation is being recorded, and so that will be sent to everyone who has attended today. And so thank you very much, Chiara and Arianna, and thank you again to all the attendees. And yes, this is...
Thanks you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.